Hey, Mr. Scott. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you're getting this. Yeah, it's been a good quite a bit since I last got to send you any games. Just overall, I'm not too happy with how I've been performing. It's been a rough time. I don't know, like sometimes I'm doing really good, and then the next game I can't think chess, and I just make a one move blunder. But I played a few tournaments in June, and near the end, I got to play a match against Zachary, which I'm really thankful for. He is a really strong player, and I need the experience, and just overall had fun getting to play him. And I wanted to send you two of the games I had against him and against Charles. I think it was, yeah, it was the Steel City Classic. So yeah, the first one. This was my first game against him. Uh, was a bit nervous to play him, but I mean he picked a really nice spot. We played in the Hoover Library, and it was a really nice spot to be at. But yeah, so the time control is 45:10. Since the library ended up closing, I think it was like, yeah, 6 p.m. Uh, we were originally planning to do 70-10 like Caesar's tournaments tend to be, but due to the time constraints, we decided to drop it down to 45. I made the joke that, oh, we're practicing early for the dual rated next Saturday. Let's see, yeah, first game started, my usual e4, and as expected, he sticks with the French, and I mean, I don't love facing the French, but I don't really hate it either. I figured he expected me to play knight d2, my usual line against it. And funnily enough, once we reached this position, he kind of joked to me saying, "I swear if you play the Tarrasch," because he hates facing him. But decided to try and surprise him with knight c3. I was debating to play knight c3 or not because I knew he played the Winnower a lot of times, and there's a whole bunch of complexities with it, and I really did not want to go into a lot of deep theory. So after Bishop before, one of my friends had showed me a interesting sideline to kind of like avoid a lot of the main line theory holes, and it's a knight e2. Interesting gambit line. Black can't really, well, they can take, but they can't really hold on to the pawn. Like if they play f5, it's a big over commitment, and moves like queen h5 later can become big problems. And if they defend later with like knight f6, then they'll be quickly met with bishop g5, and white will eventually pick this pawn back. The bishop will be removed either by a3 and it retreating, or by a3 and an exchange on c3, and white will get enough compensation for him. I remember when I was looking at some of his games, he played c5 a lot online, which immediately gives white a good edge, because here black isn't ready for all of this tension in the center yet, because after a3, bishop takes, knight takes, and knight f6, uh, d takes c5 and bishop g5 are both possible. I prepped bishop g5. I thought it was a much simpler and more direct line. All the times I've seen on his online games, he plays c takes c4, queen takes c4, and after knight c6, we pin it. And after a move like, say, d takes c4, then we go to queen a4. And we are keeping this knight pinned. We are preventing a6, really, since the pawn would be pinned. And after a natural move like bishop d7, white will castle, and will have plenty of activity in exchange for the pawns, and is just borderline winning right here. And real quick, in case he did play knight f6, I was ready to play e5, knight f d7, and I thought a decent sideline was knight ce2, which after talking with him, it turns out he actually plays this line. Um, so I decided we probably wouldn't have been able to catch him too off guard, though I had a tiny trick up my sleeve. Instead of the main knight f3, I prep h4. And the idea is after, say, queen f6, then I play f4, and say c takes d4, c takes d4, bishop b4 check. Black is trying to get white to play bishop to d2 and block its guard over the d4 pawn. And the correct move here is actually king f2. And surprisingly, the king is going to be really safe here. And in the future, the king's going to be helping support pawn pushes in the endgame. I had 2 games online in practice, and both would play f6. And after bishop e3, making sure to break this pin, otherwise there's knight sack ideas right here. Black can castle, and then after knight f3, white retains a good control over the e and d pawns, and overall is just safe here. Surprisingly, with the king sitting here, and it will quickly help escort the pawns up the board. But we didn't see that. So after knight e2, he plays knight f6, the main line. And so I played e5, knight fd7, and f4. I was trying to think, like, maybe I could kind of mix up the ideas from knight f6 lines, and when I'm going f4 later in them. So after f4, c5, and here I decided to play a3. So he surprised me a bit. He played bishop a5. Now, I expected bishop takes, and I play b takes. Knight takes is probably better, but I did not like the idea of this knight hopping in, and now I don't really have anything preventing possible d4 pushes. So I play bishop e3 here. I consider d takes c5. Now, obviously, he's not going to blunder this and the fork. It would have been nice. Maybe he could have been nice to grant that to me, but no, after just takes, and knight takes c5. Again, it's the same problem of, okay, engine likes it, but from a far side, I just didn't like not really having anything to stop this d-pawn push. So I thought bishop e3 was a good try, just developing, reinforcing the d4 square, and after c takes d4, knight takes d4, now I have a piece blockading this pawn, and knight c6 doesn't come with a tempo of my queen. He plays knight c6, and I play bishop d3. I wanted to play queen g4. I was really considering this, and let's say after castles, bishop d3, I was concerned over f5, because this is shutting off, like, my ideas of trying to go for mates here. And after I drop back with, like, queen g3, and say bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, and knight c5 is what I didn't like. I kind of stopped calculating here, because I didn't like, my bishops are for the moment, they're kind of useless. I have double pawns here, and I thought, like, future threats of 94 was just going to be really bad for me. So I decided to stick with bishop d3 first. You know, I kind of, like, keep this as ideas for later, try to stay a little bit flexible. He goes bishop to b6 here, creating this pin, and I stopped here for a good amount of time. I stopped here for about, like, 6 minutes, because I was really trying to think about how to go forward, and I was trying to find, like, typical knockout punches. There were some lines I had looked at beforehand where, like, knight takes e6 is, it's not, like, the right move, but black has to be really, really careful not to just get blown out of the water. Here, it doesn't work. I looked at knight takes e6, f takes, queen h5. If black decides to play g6, then bishop takes, and I looked at king e7, knight takes, and here it's just a draw. Now, obviously, I have to be a bit more accurate here, but the pawns will run in, and I was kind of hoping for this. I'm trying to find something to win as quick as I can. Um, and in the case of like king f8, which is what shunned me away from the idea, say bishop takes, knight takes, and castles, it looks tempting at first, and it's not even that bad considering I gave up a piece only -1. But then queen e8, and I didn't see any good way forward here, because obviously if I trade the queens, I'm just worse. So queen h3 and king g8, and I didn't see any way here to like just break the king out. I mean, sure, this activity looks nice, but there's really not anything here, and if I'm not careful soon, Black will be able to develop his pieces, and I'm just down a piece. I also tried to look at knight takes d5, and after e takes, knight f5, with their threats on g7, threats on d6, and, you know, maybe if, like, Black is helping me out and they castle, I looked at queen h5, g6, and queen h6. And after takes, bishop takes, Black cannot stop the checkmate without giving up a whole bunch of material. But sadly, those kinds of things aren't forced. Bishop takes e3, knight takes e3, knight c5, I'm just down a piece. And I don't have anything. And after a bit of thought, I found the best move, knight cb5, rerouting, I'm adding another support onto the knight, I'm threatening knight to d6, and I can play c3 to help reinforce the knight. So we see knight takes d4, and then knight c5, aiming to get my bishop off, and now there's going to be threats of knight e4 coming. So here I castled, and after a bit, he played f5. This kind of concerned me a bit. On one hand, I had that feeling that it's probably not right, but I don't really see like anything really wrong with it. I mean, I looked at queen h5 and g6 and queen h6, but after queen e7, I was like, I mean, it's really just a check, and by this point, I'm already expecting him to castle queenside, and after our analyst, he confirmed my suspicions that he was wanting to castle queenside and go for an attack down my kingside. Yeah, I didn't really see anything concrete here, because, I mean, sure, I made these dark square weaknesses, but at the same time, my dark square bishop is trapped behind here, and it's under a lot of heavy pressure at the moment, so what is it really doing? And in the case of, like, castles, and I thought queen g4 here, but then just knight takes e3, pawn takes e3, and I don't really have anything. Again, I don't have stuff like bishop h6, I'm trapped behind my own pawns. This bishop right here is being such a pain, keeping my knight pinned down, my bishop would be hanging, and I really, at the moment, don't want to play king f2, because, I mean, if the rook can get on the c file, rook c2 will always be a problem for me. I considered c3 to, like, defend, and that way, if he takes, I can take back with the queen. And I looked at f6, bishop c2, trying to preserve my bishop. This is one of my best pieces, trying to aim at that h7 square. And after f takes, and bishop to d7, I was thinking to play b4, trying to remove the knight, and that way I can play queen d3 and eye this long diagonal. But then after rook takes f1, queen takes f1, my queen's deflected off, and I don't want to play king takes and let Black immediately get checks in, and then knight e4 is a possibility, and my king's quite exposed. So after queen takes and knight e4, now Black cuts off my bishop, and this is a very, very strong knight, and obviously I don't want to just really take here, and now Black has the bishop pair. There's this really annoying pawn wedge in the center, and I just did not like my position at all. So after a bit of thought, I decided to play rook f3. Oh, sorry. I thought this was a decent and flexible idea. I'm now reinforcing the bishop on e3. And in case black ever tries the long castle, bring the rook here, and start playing g5, g4, h5, I have a rook here to kind of like act as a little bit of defense on my position. So after bishop to d7, I play rook to g3. Now aiming at this pawn, queen h5 check is back on the radar. And after queen e7, I decided like, okay, now should be a good time. Because now the difference is g6 will be met by rook takes g6. And surprisingly, he played it. And now by this point, we're only 16 moves in, and we've both already used up an hour in total. There's so many different complexities, and you are burning through our clock. But yeah, g6 surprised me, and he played it rather quickly. And I thought he was on purpose to be gambling it, ready the castle, like open that g file up and throw the kitchen sink down at me. Turns out funnily enough, he just forgot about the pin here. But he had immediately castled, and I thought like this was intentional, and I was a bit nervous here. I played rook f6. I thought this was nice. I'm kind of like keeping a good eye on the f6 and h6 square, trying to slow down any type of coordination he can have. Rook f7 is always in the air. I'm keeping decent pressure on these pawns, especially the backwards e6 pawn. So we see rook d to g8, and here I play b4. I expected knight e4, in which case I would have to trade off. I wasn't too excited with it. I mean, I'm winning here, but there's these two connected pawns right here. And, I mean, after king f2, I'm going to have to keep these pieces here for a while. Maybe play c3, just to keep them blockaded. And always keep eyes out on possible counterattacks by black. Instead, he plays knight to a4. And immediately, I'm looking at possible ideas of, like, bringing the bishop or the knight to b5. I didn't see anything too wrong. I mean, originally I thought he was trying to come to c3. I was missing that knight b2 is an idea. Keep that in mind for the future. So yeah, after knight a4, I decided to go rook f7. My idea here is, say if you go queen g6, I'm going to trade these off, and then I'm going to exchange it for the bishop, and give this check, and I will pick up two pieces, and soon quickly go for both of these pawns. And it's the same case if, say, after queen takes, pawn takes, then it's the same story, and I'm just going to pick up the knight, possibly reroute, and try to go for these pawns. So, instead, he goes bishop to e8, and I missed this. This was a nice move by him. Pinning here, I thought for a bit and decided, well, I'm already up a pawn, and really right now my queen isn't doing that much, and he's the one trying to attack on this side, so I thought, let's just go ahead, exchange some of these pieces, and then he has no attack left on my king. It turns out rook e7 was actually playable. I originally wanted to do this, but then I thought, oh, well, rook e8, and he stops it. Now, obviously, God forbid, if I take this, actually, apparently I'm still slightly better. I was like, I can't do this, because obviously this hangs, and not only does it hang, but it hangs with a check. So I can't do that, but turns out that I can exchange on here, and then I can play bishop to e5. If the rook comes in, I had missed that originally. And in the case if bishop takes, then I can play king f2, and I reinforce this bishop. Now this pawn is actually hanging, so let's just say bishop d7, and I was thinking rook g1, and then possibly just play g4, and after the following exchanges, make a pass e-pawn in the endgame. So after rook takes g8, I play king f2, just sidestepping any possible pins, reinforcing my bishop, and now my knight has free roam. So we see bishop f7 to defend, and now I go knight to b5. And by this point, so I had 5 minutes, and he was already down to 45 seconds. And there's a lot of threats. There's a double attack on a7. Knight d6 is coming with a fork. If you do something like rook to d8, well, congrats. Well, now you walk into this fork. And if you play bishop to e8, which he almost did, he hovered over grabbing the bishop. It just fails to takes, and regardless of which piece you capture back with, let's just say the rook, for example, then I have the same fork in mind. And I was thinking if bishop takes e3, king takes, and king b8 here, knight to d6, bishop h5, and I start playing with c4. And again, I'm going to aim to attack these pawns and try to get a passed pawn, only 3 steps away from promotion. Instead, he finds the best move, king to b8, and I decided to land the knight on the d6, putting a lot of pressure into black's camp. So we see bishop to h5, and here I rushed with c4. Mostly I was trying to pressure him on the clock, and again, I was hoping for this trade and hitting the pawn. Again, you can't defend now because the knight's guarding it. You can't play the f7 and rook to g8, and these bishops are still under tension, and black is going to have a hard time trying to keep this e-pawn in check, and possibly, I mean, this knight could be trapped on a4 for a while. But instead, after c4, he plays knight b2, and I kind of realized, oh no, I'm in a bit of trouble. Because originally I thought, oh, bishop f1, then he has knight d1 check. I'm losing a piece. The bishop guards these 2 squares. I'm gonna have to move somewhere, and then he just picks up my piece. What we both missed is actually I can sack the rook here. And after bishop takes, and I capture here, doubling his pawns, I take here, takes, and now bishop to d3. This pawn will fall, this pawn's weak, these pawns are doubled, and white's going to have 2 passed pawns and plenty of compensation for it. That would have been a crazy one to look at. But I had missed this, and realizing the incoming danger, I captured onto b6, removing all the tension here. So we see knight takes d3, king to e3, and this surprised me. He took on c4, not capturing the bishop back. Because I was surprised, because now bishop to d4, and I come back, and I was thinking I can sack on here. He did this trying to preserve the opposite color bishops, because let's just say if he took here and I take, and takes, now with it being a knight versus bishop, practically speaking, it's much easier for me to convert this rather than having opposite color bishops on the board, and this will be showed later on when I kind of struggled a bit in the time scrambles to not blunder a draw. But after king e3 and d takes e4, I dropped back, and now he plays b5. Now, when he played it, he had like 2 seconds left. It ended up being 2 minutes to 12 seconds because of the 10-second increment. So I take on b5, and now we see rook to c8 to defend. Turns out I could actually take on a7 with check, and after king moves, I have knight d6, counter-attacking the rook, and wherever the rook moves, I can just drop back. You can't push the pawn because the knight will hang. I missed this and went knight to d6 first, forking the rook and pawn. And after rook c7, I take here. I was just thinking I can remove this, and then he hits me back with knight takes f4, and we're both in a time scramble at this point, and it's really hard to calculate at some points because there's so many different ways he could sack the knight back for a pawn. So I played g takes f4, and now rook takes e4, and I'm still slightly better if both sides play the best. So after rook takes c4, I play rook c1. I'm trying to come in onto the 7th and 8th files. So we see bishop g6. And right here, this is where I stop taking notation. Um, we were both under a minute by this point. Now, the following is nowhere near the moves. This is just me trying to reset up the position. But basically what happened is I played king to d3 and kicked him back and eventually worked my way onto the queen side. I was able to win the a pawn, technically. I'll kind of show you. I was able to get the a pawn, but at the expense of these two being doubled, and it made it really hard because instead of just playing b6, which would have been practically much better speaking, now these pawns kind of blockade each other. And again, these aren't all the right moves, but I managed to get my king to a5. Zachary rerouted his bishop to d5, and got to a position where he was threatening mate. I think after takes. Ah, yes, okay. So, I think this is the position. So I gave him a check here, king to a7, and... Oh, wait, sorry, no. This ain't it. Okay, yeah, here we are. Sorry. Okay, we're still here, yeah. So we got to this position, and by this point, I didn't even see this mate threat. I almost here played, because originally when I gave him this check, and the king moves up, my idea was to play rook g7, and I was like, oh, I'm winning the bishop, and right before I played it, I realized that's mate. And I would have been so disappointed in myself if I blundered that. So realizing that in the time scramble, I played bishop to b8, and it leads to a pretty cool looking mate. So after king to a8, bishop c7, king's forced back to a7, and bishop c6 is checkmate. Bishop gets check, and the pawn and rook keeps the king blocked in. Whew, that one was a a very stressful one. My adrenaline rush was going 100 miles per hour, but that was a high morale booster. I mean, it wasn't rated, but it's technically my first classical win over Zachary. And I started the match off with a win. He went on to win the match. He crushed me in the next two games as expected, but I was happy to get at least one win. Funnily enough, my brother, he when I asked him what was his predictions for the game, he told me that I pretty much had no chance to win the game. Maybe if I'm lucky I get a draw or two, but winning, no chance. But yeah. That was ooh, that was a game. I was really happy about it. I don't think I did that bad. I mean, it's like one of my first games against a 2100 where I don't think I was ever worse at any point that I can think of. I mean, the time I was worried the most, I would have to say, where is it? Yeah, probably around when he played f5, because I'm prone to seeing way too many ghost threats, and I was getting worried about a pawn storm coming on here, which is a big reason why I opted for rook f3. But yeah, so that was that game against him. So the second game I have against Charles in the Steel City. By this point, I think it was like 1 out of 2. Yeah, I had lost to... Oh yeah, I think I lost. Yeah, I lost to you in the first round. Yeah, just blindsiding, just hanging a pawn. Forgetting about that. But yeah, so he starts off with d4. In our last game before this, I went with the Benoni, and what was it? I think. Yeah, I think he played into the main line. Can't remember. I'll have to look back into that. But it ended up into a draw. But instead here, I decided to opt for e6. Now by this point, part in preparation against Zachary, uh, I was preparing the French defense, and against d4, I was prepping the Dutch. So I thought, e6 on the first move was a nice move order. If white plays e4, well, then I can play d5. We've transposed into a French, and I don't think any d4 players are going to be the most comfortable in French positions. So after c4, I play f5, and we transpose into a Dutch defense. So he plays g3, the main line, knight f6, bishop g2, and I go to d5. I'm not too worried about c captures, because then I can just take, and I'm going to remain with firm hold over the e4 square, which is say if white continues development, knight to f3, bishop to d6, castles, and knight c3. Then I'm just going to reinforce with c6, bishop g5. I'm going to sidestep, again adding more control over e4. And after e3, then I can land a knight on there. And I like my position here. And if white plays knight f3, I actually had this in the prior game against Xavier, Rodriguez, not Bruni. I wish I had beaten him in that. So I played c6, castles, and now we kind of get a stonewall-ish setup. He played b3, all of this is theory, and an important move is queen e7 to prevent bishop a3 from coming. And say after bishop e2, knight d7, and black has a pretty straightforward plan of development, f5 ideas later in the future. Instead, he surprised me. He played b3 early, wanting to go for this bishop a3 idea to exchange the dark squared bishops. I stopped for a bit, and I was trying to consider a couple options. I first thought about bishop b4 check. This looked like the most natural one, but the problem is after bishop d2, obviously I don't want to just take this and kind of just wasting time. I thought about a5, knight f3, castles, and I really didn't see too much here, and I kind of felt like I was letting him off the hook. He gets the castle, he's going to trade off the bishops, which was his goal anyways, and he's just going to continue with easy development, and I kind of have a weird pawn setup here. And then I considered playing c6, wanting to bring the queen in, say after knight f3, bishop e4 check, bishop d2, and now queen a5, putting some extra pressure here. I wanted to do this, but then I saw a3, and it looked really uncomfortable for me. Bishop takes c2, knight takes, say knight e4, trying to put a little bit of pressure. After castles, I thought knight c3 looked good for me, but after queen e1, I don't have a threat. And pretty soon, I'm going to get kicked out, and white's just going to barrel down with his pawns. So I settled for knight e4, trying to get a firm grip on these dark squares. Now, let's just say a waiting move. Now I can give this check, and if the bishop comes in, then I can remove his bishop pair. Here, he played knight f3. I decided to play c6, just going for the usual setup. He castles. I played knight d7. I wasn't wanting to play bishop to d6, because he's going to play bishop a3 anyways, and trade it off, and it's kind of a waste of a move. So I was like, if he's going to trade it, I might as well just go ahead and start developing my other pieces. So knight d7, bishop a3, captures, and then queen a5, gaining some time on this, trying to get a firm grip over the c3 square. So we see knight b1, I castle, and he plays queen to c2, and I just continue developing. And he already played knight e5, and I thought for a bit here, and I thought it would be kind of funny. So I did knight to d7, and the point being, I want to bait him to playing f3, which he ended up doing. But real quick, the engine's way of quote-unquote punishing it was knight d3. I missed this. And after, say, knight to the f6 back, rook c1, bishop d7, a4, real quickly, yeah, these pawns are they're gonna start pushing, and white has a whole bunch of material ready to make a pass pawn. But he plays f3, and suddenly I'm better, because after knight takes e5, if you take on immediately recapture on e5, then I have queen c5 check. You can't go here because of knight f2, so e3, queen takes e3, king h1, and knight to c5. Point being, after e3, the queen now controls that. And knight c5, I'm up a pawn, possibly maybe I might win a second, and I'm doing better. So here instead he plays f takes e4, and he would be better had it not been for a nice shot I had knight to g4, and now I'm threatening to do this triple fork here, and even if he saves the exchange, just for, okay, I know this is hanging, but just for example, I can remove this nice bishop here, recapture the pawn with the f-pawn, and this king is going to be fairly weak. So instead, after knight g4, he surprised me. He took on d5, allowing me to win the exchange. Now, by the engine, this is the best way to go. Trying to go for the grabbing some of my pawns and weakening my pawn chain as compensation. He went queen to d2, which is a mistake, as now I can trade off the queens, and obviously, when you're giving up an exchange, trading off your most powerful piece will benefit me in the long run. So after rook takes, I thought for a bit, because it's a question, take with the e-pawn or take with the c-pawn. The correct one is to take with the c-pawn. If you take with the e-pawn, the problem is, after c takes, and my idea being rook to d8, because I'm going to counterattack on d4, white can capture here, and this bishop will become a massive problem for me. Say after b takes, bishop takes, rook b8, and now pawn to d5, white's actually better here. They have this nice pass pawn, this bishop is being really annoying, and my rooks just really have no play. And the difference with c takes is now after white captures, rook d8 now works here. Because now you can't take here because I'm going to take here. White no longer can take on b7. I have that guard. So let's say after knight f3, rook to d6, e7, king f7, and now I'm going to pick up the second pawn. White can try to fight with knight g5, king takes, knight takes, but after rook to d2, I have a lot of pressure on here, and possibly speaking, White's gonna have to spend a whole bunch of time to save his knight. Otherwise, I'm just gonna be able to crap it if I can get the g6. So instead, we see rook to c1. He used a good bit of time here, 12 minutes, and by now he had 16 minutes to my 31 minutes. So afterwards, I play e takes c5, just taking my pawn back. He plays rook c7, which I kind of started getting a bit nervous here. So we see rook to b8, trying to defend the pawn and get out of the way of this diagonal. I didn't like b6, because then knight c4, taking advantage of this pin, and knight e4 is coming, knight d6 could be an idea, and I wasn't a big fan of it. So instead, he plays knight f3, rook d7, I'm trying to, like, get rid of his last rook, rook c3, and I was pondering a bit, because now knight e5 is coming. He's fighting, and there's a lot of ways that can quickly go wrong. So I went rook e7. The idea being, if knight e5, I can play bishop e6, and after something like king f2, then I'll play g6, and I'm kind of holding down the fort together. So, instead, instead he plays knight to g5, which surprised me. And I stopped here for a bit, thinking of what to do, because bishop takes d5 is now a threat. It's going to come with check, this can hang, and I could be worse here real quickly. But I found a really interesting idea. h6, allowing this to be taken with the tempo. Obviously, I cannot take here because I'm sorry, I can't defend the pawn because knight takes, rook takes. Yeah, that's gonna be embarrassing. But the point being is after knight takes d5, I go king f8. And if you tried to go in knight h7 check, obviously I can't come here because of the bishop. King e8, bishop c4. Now I can go bishop e6, trade off these bishops, and this knight's trapped. There's no escape squares, and there's really no way that white can save it. I mean, this rook has nowhere to come in. These pawns can't do anything because this pawn guards g5. So instead, he plays knight back to f3, and now I play rook takes e2, and here it's going to become a big rush. Rook to c7 and knight to e5 are going to come. There's going to be all kinds of checks and mate threats, and I have to be careful not to be too greedy, because if I just start grabbing pawns, white's possibly going to either checkmate me or just start winning the whole house. He decides to go with knight e5 first, and yeah, I was considering rook takes a2, but this is being too greedy. Rook c7, rook d2, bishop f7. This is mate, which is so stupid. And I was looking at this position, and I'm like, I'm getting mated here. How do I defend myself? I can't move the bishop. I mean, I thought I was lost. Now apparently, this is a draw somehow. Let me see engine lines here. G5 apparently. Oh yeah, to bring this out, but then there's the discover checks, and I'm just not a big fan of it. Instead, I decided to go rook to d2 first. A move ahead of time. We see rook c7, and it gives me time to take on d4 instead. And I'm kind of desperately trying to bring the rook back. Just try to safeguard myself. So we see rook f7 check. Bishop c4 was an option, but then I can play rook e4. And after knight g6, king e8, rook takes, and I was ready to play b5 here. Take the bishop away somewhere, rook to d4, and after the knight retreats, it's very complicated because all these pawns are weak, but at least I can bring my rook back, and I can avoid mates for now. Instead, he goes rook f7 check. Obviously, do not, just, no, don't go here and walk into this discovery. I go king e8, and we see bishop c4. Obviously, you can't take on here just yet, because I take on d5. This was the point of me wanting to go for this d4 pawn. So after bishop c4, he missed this move, b5. And I thought this was nice. Let's just say, for example, let's say if you go to knight c6 now, then I can give a check, bishop f1, and now I can take here. And after white captures here, bishop to b7, and the knight's trapped. Yeah, it's becoming a kind of common theme with this game. The knight getting trapped on h7, the knight getting trapped on b7. So white can't go for that, so instead he goes bishop f1 first. And I decided to go to rook to d5. The knight now goes to c6. King takes, knight takes, and once again bishop b7, and it's the same problem. This knight is now trapped. I'm just going to drop back and pick it up. And it was here in this position that Charles resigned. And I honestly, I thought I was doing a whole lot worse in the endgame. But surprisingly, when I went back to analyze it, 93.5% accuracy. That's kind of one of my better accuracies against National Master. So I think that's the third National Master I beat. I know I beat Brian, and I think there was like another 2000 that was in them. I forgot his name, but from Georgia, I think. I can't remember if he was or not. That'll make Charles the second or third, but considering before this, I was like, I think 3 losses in the draw. Getting one win against him felt nice. But yeah, yeah, I just thought that it was some interesting games. I, I was happy with with those results. But yeah, sorry, it's like 5 in the morning. I'm having a hard time with the words. Uh, but yeah, I was kind of worried. With where was it? Yeah, about round okay, here. Because there was a lot of times where he could make some very serious compensation for it, but I think I defended fairly well. And got a good result out of it. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to the dual raid. I'm hoping that I can get some good results. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying I'm gonna beat every 2,000 now. God forbid. No, I'm still gonna get crushed by them. But at least being able to pull off a win here and there um, makes me know it's possible. So I hope I can do well. Cause God, that 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 last tournament, it was a pain. Um, like I decided with draw after that game against Arush. I'll just show it to you real quick. I had black. He started with e4. I went with c5, knight f3, d6, and we repeat our game from last time. Last time he went with e4, and I was able to get a position where I quickly had a lot of development. Instead, he plays d4 first, which just straight up paying his e4 pawn. He mixed up the move order, because in the delayed Alapin, the idea is to go bishop e2. You can't capture just yet because of queen a4. And then after, say, for example, knight c6, then you play d4, and this isn't capturable because of d5, and wherever the knight moves, it's the same idea. So after d4, captures, 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 he goes bishop to e3. I decide to defend with the knight. And then he goes bishop c4. Originally, I wanted to play e6 and go for d5, which was the right way to do it, and I probably would have went on to win if I had done this. But I just didn't like before, and I don't know, like, uh, throughout both of those games against Anmei and against Rouge, I just could hardly focus or calculate, and I really don't know why. I don't know what happened to me that day. Um, but yeah, I was scared of b4 coming in, so instead I went with knight b6, thinking like, okay, well now, uh, he doesn't really have any good squares to retreat the bishop to. If he goes back to e2, he's kind of wasted some time, and I'll continue to develop, and life will be good. Yeah, we both miss bishop takes f7. Yeah, and king takes, and there's this pin, and my advantage is lost, and my king's exposed in the middle. Uh, he missed it though. Let's see. Let me just promote this. So after knight b6, let me just remove this. He goes bishop b3. I take here, and after pawn takes, after a bit of kerbuckle, I was keeping an eye on this because obviously, let's just say if I did something like queen d7, well, congrats, I just hung a piece. So I was trying to make sure that never worked. And I stopped for a while. I was like, do I want to bring out the g4? Do I want to bring it to f5? Do I want to play g6? And I was like, I'll play g6 and just try to go for a dragon setup. And I missed. At first, I wasn't worried about queen d4. Because I thought, like, okay, queen d4, e5. And I'm fine here. The problem is knight takes e5. If I take, there's queen takes, and I'm losing the rook with the check. And I thought, like, here I thought, okay, well, it's fine. I have bishop g7. But then queen b4, and it's just bad. And and all of this is just going to hang. Like if I take here, um, now I have to suffer with this. So fun. Um, but instead he opted out of it. He played queen to d1, which put me back into the game. But I just couldn't focus for some reason, and I started burning up a lot of time, just pretty much just running in circles in my head, because I would start thinking like, bishop e6 and castles, or bishop g4 here, captures. Oh, this is hanging. I don't really want to play queen c7, and I kept running back in circles, and so, like bishop e6 again, castles. I already looked at this. Why am I thinking this again? And I don't know, just kind of beating myself up about it. Uh, and eventually afterwards, I think here I played bishop to g7 and castles, and he plays c4, and I was like, okay, he's wanting to go knight c3, knight c5. I mean knight d5. Well, when we go bishop e6, my goal is now to push for d5 and break out, kind of similar to like a knight short position. And, I mean, had he let me, I probably would have been doing fine. He plays knight c3, and at first I thought it stopped it. The best move, apparently, is to play d5. But I didn't even think it worked, because after captures, this hangs. But the point being, apparently, that, black is going to have a really good endgame here. But I had missed this. And instead, after bishop e6 and knight c3, let me just promote that. Wait, I'll just delete this. I just couldn't concentrate. I was considering, do I want to do queen e7 and like defend in the long ways. I was debating between queen c7 and queen e7. Ideas being still keeping in mind like all of these sacks. Even rook takes, and bishop takes, like obviously if the queen's not defending, could be a problem. So I want to make sure the rooks protect each other at all times. I was like, queen c7, and if knight d5, then I can be happy to trade these off bishop f5 and have these bishops there in the long run. But I didn't like going here, and there's always bishop g5 ideas, or knight g5 ideas, and they looked really annoying. And I spent some time making sure that knight d5 was perfectly fine for me, that I didn't see anything else. And I opted for queen c7. And yeah, I was thinking like, okay, well, now with queen c7, I'm trying to take control of the c file, and immediately he plays this, and I realize how dumb I am. Now this is still equal, but only and only if you find after queen takes, there's knight takes c4, and let's just say after captures, then captures here, it gets very chaotic. Black can hold, but it's a mess. Because problem is, if you don't find it, and obviously I didn't, I kept looking at lines where, like, say I trade, and if I go here, and now the bishop, the knight, and the rook are all putting tremendous pressure on my position, and I'm just going to be lost here pretty soon. Like, probably even like a c-pawn push just to kick the knight away could be coming in the future. But yeah, after knight b5, mostly I was kind of just beating myself up, and I decided to resign here, even though it was equal. It was just mostly because I just couldn't focus, and I just had to get out of there, so that's why I just decided to withdraw. I just was not in any good mood to be playing a tournament. But yeah, hopefully Saturday I can play like the first 2 games and not like this. It's a hope, at least.